I think what's really important in terms of making a difference in the world isn't the answers as much as the questions you ask. If you ask really important questions, that's what's going to make a big difference. We've learned so much in the last 100 years about how to treat patients. We know so much more, so people live longer, healthier lives. Part of the culture of our laboratory is to invent things and discover things, but we want to get them out to the world.
Hi, Bob. Welcome to the HumanWare project.
Well, thank you for having me.
As one of the most important scientists of our time and being known as the Edison of the medicine, how would you explain in a very simple form what you do in the world of biomedical?
So first, I'm a professor, so I teach students about biomedical science and engineering. Secondly, I have a good-sized research lab, and we do research in certain areas of medicine, in particular things that have to do with materials. So one set of those things are what I call drug delivery systems. There might be anything from transdermal patches to injectable systems that might last a long time, to the lipid nanoparticles that you might have used in your COVID vaccines, and other things too. And then another big area is what I'll call tissue engineering or regenerative medicine. So we actually try to create tissues and organs from scratch. So now you can make artificial skin for burn victims and new blood vessels if somebody is badly hurt. And you could also possibly, which we're working on, make what I'll call organs or tissues on a chip. So you could actually make, we're actually working, for example, on a brain on a chip or a gastrointestinal tract on a chip.
What is part of your work that people might have misconception on how the drug being delivered or on the rejuvenation medicine?
People, of course, I don't know what the misconceptions might necessarily be, but I think, in terms of rejuvenation medicine, that would have to be the medicine. I mean, the delivery system helps and gets it to the right place, maybe with the right timing, and ideally with very, very few side effects. So the delivery systems are very, very helpful. I mean, just to give you an example, if somebody had heart disease, there's something that people put in the body called a stent, and it keeps the blood vessels open. But a lot of times when people put those stents in, it causes problems. And somebody might die just from what's called the proliferation of certain cells that the stent is touching. So what they've done is make what's called a drug-eluting stent. What that means is there's a drug called Taxol. It's a very toxic drug. It's actually used to treat cancer patients. So if you gave that drug at the level and you swallowed it, it would actually, to stop that problem, it would probably kill you because you get so much toxicity. So what they do, based on our work, is they actually coat those stents with a very, very thin film with the Taxol in it. So you actually deliver the drug locally right where you want it, and that keeps the patient alive for a long time with almost no toxicity.
As according to you, so it means that when I swallow a pill, the pill will know exactly the time when it transforms to my certain area of my body, and then it release the dose to the place?
Well, you can do it different ways. In the case I was talking about, it's actually physically placed on it, and then but what you're saying could also be done. I mean, we're also working on that, targeting it. It's like a magic bullet. We're actually working on ways to target to different parts of the body, like the liver and muscle and well, pretty much every heart, almost everywhere.
Very incredible. And how does this drug delivery system or all your research started from the beginning?
Yeah. So, well, this goes back 51 years, over 51 years. I got my degree in chemical engineering, actually here at MIT, and all my friends went to work in oil companies. I wasn't that interested in that. I spent a lot of time looking at them, but at the end I decided I didn't want to do that.
Did you apply the job in the oil company, or you just altogether ignore it?
I applied because my friends applied. I actually got 20 job offers from oil companies, four from Exxon alone. But they had so many openings, it would have, it was easy. But I wasn't excited about, I wanted to do something that I hoped would help people, save lives and things like that. At any rate, I ended up working in a hospital with a man named Judah Folkman. He was a very famous surgeon. And he had this idea that if you could stop blood vessels, maybe that would someday be a new way to stop cancer and treat cancer. And nobody believed him except he did, and I didn't know much about biology. I thought it was a very good idea. So there was no way to really study blood vessels and molecules substances that might bring them in or stop them. So we had to develop a way to do that. And that's where I got into the drug delivery systems. We actually developed the first micro and nanoparticles that could deliver large molecules like proteins or DNA or RNA.
And how old were you when you were that age?
I started at 25.
That's very early, because I know you have over 1,400 patents. And throughout those patents, how do you start to build up so many of them? And throughout those different patents, is there anything you can tell us that you feel it's very exciting when it's being, invented?
Well, sure. Well, so we have a lot of patents because I've had a lot of students, and I think part of the culture of our laboratory is to invent things and discover things, but we want to get them out to the world. And if you don't patent them, then it's harder to do that because you need to raise the money. In terms of ones that are exciting, I mean, I'd like to think there are a lot. I mean, almost all of them. I mean, some of the newer ones are actually things like that brain on a chip that I mentioned to you, that we have patent on that. We also have had patents on really making any tissue or organ because we were amongst the first to do it. And we also have patents on all kinds of nanoparticles for delivering things. And I mean, we have patents on, actually it's not even limited to medicine. Some of our patents have led to new cosmetics and other areas.
Like for example, for the patent you're talking about in the brain, in the chips, what does that mean? And what are the applicable future that you see in this sector?
I think when you have this brain on a chip, right now it's just very hard to study brain disease. Like if Alzheimer's, people have tried to study Alzheimer's for 40 years and they haven't made much progress. And we don't know the cause, we don't know how to stop it. And the reason for that is it's very hard to do experiments on human beings. If you could do it outside the body and get a result, I mean, you could do it probably thousands of times faster because, everything could be very controlled and you could use different patient cells and things like that.
Also on the cosmetic part, I do know you are advisor for one of the very big cosmetic company, Estee Lauder, and with the sun protection and the different part of things of the skin. So what are your job related to that company and also why it matters?
Yeah, well, I think there's different things. I mean, so actually the first way I got into cosmetics is we actually started a company called Living Proof. And Jennifer Aniston was actually involved in it. She actually was sitting right where you are a number of times. And we created new hairsprays that got rid of frizz, new hairsprays that gave hair more body. At any rate, that company did very well. Actually, Unilever acquired it, and now it's like 5 times the size. And Shiseido, we actually came up with some skincare products that Shiseido bought. We had a spin-off company. And that's also being used. But Estee Lauder called me up and they said, well, could I help them? And so I gave them advice, and then they gave Anna Jakulenik, who's one of the people who works with me, a grant to come up with better lotions that could what should I say, be safer, not safer, but lotions that could be, if you had suntan lotion or you had other things that would be environmentally friendly and maybe work even better.
If I'm coming from a very self-engineered perspective, how should I think about the principle of what are the good things for my skin?
Well, I think your skin will tell you. I think if it's like some creams are very greasy, some might, smell bad, some might not even be safe. So you want and some might stay on for days and days. So I don't know that there's necessarily a one size fits all, but I think a lot you kind of tell when you put it on and you see how it feels and so forth. We did the hairspray thing. I mean, there were about 60 companies that were making no things that would prevent frizz. But people really didn't like them very much because they were heavy on your hair, so you kind of know. Both my wife and daughter told me that. And then also, a lot of them didn't work.
Okay.
So you can so I think, but there's not, I don't, like I said, I just don't know that there's just one size fits all. But I think you sort of know.
Yeah, and throughout your career, like it's just incredible how much energy and the different company you are being involved in, all the papers and patents. How did you like see like the difference between doing the research to put it into the real life work?
One is, like say I have a big lab, but it's an academic lab, university lab, and we don't make products in the lab, but we have made a lot of discoveries and we've made different new molecules and things like that. But if I want to get those out to patients, to save lives, you have to have a company involved. I mean, for a lot of reasons, both manufacturing it, doing, human trials and so forth. So when I first started doing the work on some of these delivery systems, I thought I'd write scientific papers and that people would use them. But that really didn't happen. I mean, we did get a couple large companies interested in it, and they kind of gave up. And then I kind of learned if you're not your own champion, nobody else will be. So with some of my students and one of my friends, we started a company, and that started to make products, and we've kept doing that. I mean, we've actually gotten, I think, 11 products from different companies I've helped get started in the last just in the last year get approved by FDA. But those came from companies, even though some of the research that led to them goes back 25 or more years. But it takes a long time to get products to, get all the, human testing.
Yeah. And what are the very first company you have joined and you have starting?
First company I joined was a company, or that I helped start, was a company called Enzotech. And it did two things. We had a food component that was making things like fat substitutes and so forth. And ultimately that got acquired by another company, but they made some of the very first fat substitutes, and they were in sour cream and yogurt and ice cream and things like that. But that goes back to the 1980s. And then the other part of it was doing drug delivery systems, little microspheres that would lead to new treatments for schizophrenia and other diseases. And that's still around today. It's merged with another company, but that's led to some of the most common ways of treating opioid addiction, schizophrenia, and other diseases.
And how did you see your time like being distributed through your day-to-day life?
Most of what I do is here at MIT and working with people, the students and postdocs in the lab. But we do start companies. Most of the time, by the way, I do it with my own students that they've been very involved in, but they've graduated by then and want to see the things they do make a difference. Also, when you start a company, in contrast to some other things, it's almost like a child growing up. When you first start it, there's almost nothing there. It's very tiny and it needs a lot of nurturing. But then, more people come into the company and it gets bigger and it gets stronger and it needs you less. And I mean, so like take Moderna or Alnylam, those are ones that have thousands of people at them now. But when they first started, they, had really nobody, maybe one of my students or something like that.
Yeah, as you co-founded Moderna, like they make the COVID vaccine possible. What are the starting point for a company like that?
Well, I think the starting point was another scientist coming to see me, this Derek Rossi, and then having some very smart business people like Nubar Fayan, who was at Flagship, and we also had this guy Ken Chen, who was a clinician, a cardiologist. So we were the founders. But then we got an amazing CEO. That's really critical. That's Stefan Bancel. And you keep building it. I always thought it would be a very big company. I mean, but you never know exactly. Every company has its ups and downs.
What are the quality you see in different CEOs that could potentially lead to their success?
I put it in a couple categories. One is experience. You almost don't want somebody who's older and has done things a lot. They might not have fire in their belly. But at the same time, I don't know that you'd want somebody fresh out of college, because they might not, especially in an area like biotech, have the experience, to know all the right things to do. The second thing you want is, so you want maybe somebody in the middle, that's got fire in their belly, but some experience. The second thing you want is somebody who's just very smart, very hardworking, wants to hire people better than they are, knows how to, think about raising money, knows something about regular FDA, about patents. Doesn't have to be an expert at all of them, but has enough of a knowledge that they can help think through the issues on them and hire the best people.
And is there any advice that you take from your personal mentor or throughout your career that you think is very advice to give for the biomedical student or the people who are currently forming a biotech company?
My mentor, he didn't really give advice per se, but what he did, which was very good for me, is he believed that anything is possible, and he didn't give up. And I think that those are two important things. Some of the advice that I give, it's interesting. One of my students, and she's a professor at Purdue, was giving a talk earlier in the year. I had no idea she was giving it, but some other person photographed a slide she had, and she'd just gotten some grants turned down, and she had a picture of herself, sort of not very happy. But then she said, well, my advisor, me, told her what's really important isn't how you handle things when things go in your favor. In other words, when things are good. What matters is how you handle things when they don't go well. That's what's really important. And I think that's right. I think, success is easy. Everybody can deal with it. But when things don't go well, you really have to hang in there. I guess the other thing I sometimes say to people, but maybe this is more academic, is that your whole life, if you're teaching somebody or if you're in school, your whole life is you get judged by how good your answers are to other people's questions. In other words, grammar school, high school, college, you get grades, and the way you get your grades are your answers to somebody else's questions. But I think what's really important in terms of making a difference in the world isn't the answers as much as the questions you ask. So I always feel like if you ask really important questions, that's what's going to make a big difference. So I always say kind of my job as a professor is to help somebody make a transition from somebody who gives good answers to also someone who can ask good questions.
Is there any moment in your career, to making so much achievement, there must be some moment that you felt, I imagine, like it's difficult. Could you share some of those moments with us?
Yeah, lots of them. I mean, especially early in my career. I tried, like I mentioned, I did get a lot of job offers from oil companies, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. I tried to get a teaching job. I had 40 straight rejections. Then I tried to get a job in a medical school or hospital, and almost nobody would write me back. I tried to get research grants. My first 9 were rejected. Then I tried to get a faculty position in chemical engineering department. No chemical engineering department would hire me. That's my background. So I had lots of rejection for a long time. Tried to get a patent. Took me, 5 straight times I got rejected.
How you feel? Do you just keep going?
No, you feel depressed. I felt depressed.
Because interesting, you say you got 43 rejections, and you also got 43 honorary degrees. As I say, it's very interesting serendipity of how the numbers lined up.
Well, now I'm up to 45
Okay.
honorary degrees.
My bad.
Not at all.
When is those hard time who's coming? Like, what are your mindset to go through it?
I think you keep trying. I think I have to say that wasn't always my mindset either. You get depressed. You're sad. I certainly have had companies not do well, and I've had companies do well. But when things don't go well, you're sad. I don't think there's any two ways about it. You keep trying any way you can. I think it's important to have people that you can talk to that care about you and that can give you good advice. I think because you may feel sad. And in terms of finding success, I think it depends. That sort of has to be a case-by-case situation. Is the patent bad? Is the science bad? Do you not have enough money? Somebody else beat you to it. I think you have to look at what's going on, and I think once you understand that better, maybe you can map a plan that will help you get there. But I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all.
What are the most interesting project you are currently working on?
Gio Traverso and I and our team at MIT, we developed it's kind of like it's a pill. It's in a capsule. You swallow it, the capsule dissolves, and then the solution comes out. But what it does is once it comes out, it actually makes kind of a gel that coats your stomach or your intestine and stays there for about 24 hours. And that gives you a number of opportunities. So it's like it's just coating it. And it seems to be very safe and everything else. We're already doing clinical trials. So some of the things that it enables you to do, say you have an intestinal disease. So you'll be able to treat it much better because you can get high concentrations of whatever treatment you're doing right there. Whereas if you gave it orally, again, maybe it would cause side effects. And if you didn't have the gel, it might cause side effects in other parts of the body. Another thing is if you design it right, you might be able to block, say, certain fats from getting through or sugar from getting through. So you may have anti-obesity treatments.
Yeah, and how far are we to bring this product to the market?
But I hope, in a few years. But it depends on a lot of things.
And could you walk us through what is day-to-day life into Bob's world look like?
Yeah, well, there's no single answer. I got about 16 years ago, Nature, the journal, they wanted to ask that exact question. So they had this very intelligent woman, Helen Pearson, who was a biologist, follow me around the entire day. But before she did, I said to her, there's a couple of possibilities. That could be one kind of day. I said another kind of day is you could follow me onto an airplane, because that's part of my life too, is traveling and giving lectures and consulting and giving advice. But if I picked the day that I was here, that she wrote about, which is fairly typical, I had a lot of meetings with students, but then I had people coming in from companies. I had different people call up for advice, including people from various countries in Europe, different politicians, and then I did a number of emails. I think I probably had over 20 meetings. And then I had one lecture, and and then I helped and then my kids were younger then, so I was helping my daughter with her homework. I think she put that in.
And let's say if it's for today.
I got up and I, probably around 6, I had talked to my wife a little bit. She had to go for an appointment, but then I made myself a double espresso, and then I did some exercise. I did walking and weights for a couple of hours, and then I drove into MIT. My first meeting was actually with the president and vice president of Cornell University. That's where I was an undergraduate, and they had come up because they wanted to have some advice with me, from me. Then I had a shorter meeting with some students. Then I had a thesis defense. A thesis presentation from a student. Then I had a lunch with these people from Taiwan that wanted some advice. Then, then I had a board meeting of a company that I'm chairman of the board of that's developing new oral delivery systems and giving them advice. Then I had somebody come to see me who wanted to give me a present and get some pictures taken, and I'd given a lecture for his conference. And then you.
Yes, that's the best part, right?
Of course.
Yes, because I felt like sometimes when we look into the people who have a lot of achievement, but they also spending quite a lot of time doing great job, I'm just like very shocked about how much energy you have every day.
I think it's just that I really love what I do. And I think if you love what you do, then you do feel energy for it. And I mean, to me, being a teacher, doing research, trying to do some good for the world, I mean, it makes me feel good. And so I think if you're happy about what you're doing, I think that's probably the best cornerstone. But maybe exercise is a good thing to do no matter what.
Yeah, that's true. And when you see like the future 10 years or 20 years, even 30 years into the biomedical world.
Well, I think it'll be a very good future. I think, especially the biomedical world. I mean, the good thing about it is I think we've learned so much in the last 100 years about how to treat patients. You know, there are vaccines, there's all kinds of medicines. Now we have all kinds of genetic approaches to do things. So I think we know so much more, so people live longer, healthier lives. And I think that will continue.
And where do you see the low-hanging fruit in the future of medical? Like people can study and getting the fattest result.
Well, I think fastest results are things where you can get a lot of data, something where you have good, I'm going to say this in a general way. There are systems, and we've done a lot in this area of what I call high throughput, ways to do thousands and thousands of experiments, but in a relatively short time. Sometimes that's machines, or sometimes that's designing things. And then that's also a situation where you can use artificial intelligence, because when you get lots and lots of good data, you can use it to analyze it and make predictions about what the next experiment should be.
Okay, and is there any biotech company you are excited to see the research or the type of work they are doing currently?
So Synthesis one we talked about. There's another one called Souffle Therapeutics. And here what we're doing is Alnylam, which I mentioned before. I was on their scientific advisory board from the beginning, and I was on it for 18 years. They've done a great job of delivering siRNA, which is something that can knock out a gene or knock it down, to the liver. Here, our idea is now we're going to, with Souffle, is deliver these siRNAs, these things that will knock it out, to every other tissue or organ in the body, like the heart, the muscle, pretty much everything. And so that will open the door to treating many new diseases like heart disease, muscle wasting, things like that. Then there's another one that Dan Anderson and I are working on to create an artificial pancreas. So if somebody had diabetes, they'd be fine. And then there's another one that Gio Traverso and I are working on, where we came up with a way to deliver these. Right now, you get injections for a lot of things. We came up with a way to not have injections, just deliver it orally.
And from all the paper you have published, if you can name one that you feel is, when you publish that, is your most exciting one?
Well, for me, probably our 1976 paper in Nature, which was the first delivery of large molecules from tiny systems, including nucleic acids and RNA or DNA or nucleic acids, and proteins too.
What will be the one longevity and or healthcare advice you would give to our audience?
I do think it's good to also understand the latest things in medicine, and I think you do want to have. I think vaccines are, really important, because especially as you get older, your immune system's not so good. So I think having, I can just tell you myself, I took different Prevnar vaccines as well as the COVID vaccine, flu vaccine, and RSV vaccine. I think doing that, just in the last 4 or 5 months. So I think doing that kind of thing is really, preventative things like that, I think are really important. Not smoking, that's also probably a good thing.
In general, like, what is a vaccine? What does it do?
Well, let's say you have something bad coming into your body, like a virus that could kill you. So what a vaccine does is what it does is it gives you the opportunity, if that bad thing comes in, whether it's smallpox or polio or COVID, whatever the bad thing is, it gives your body, the body recognizes it. And I could go into how that happens, but it allows the body to recognize it in such a way that the body unleashes things that can attack and destroy it. And that has to do with both immune cells and what are called antibodies. So that's very, very powerful. It's also very specific. Each vaccine gives you the opportunity that whenever these bad guys come in, that your body will destroy it.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge thing. Because having that, and not most places, pretty much every public health agency not Robert Kennedy, but pretty much every public health agency has said that it's by far the most effective and safest thing you can ever do for your health is a vaccine.
What do you think it will cause a lasting change in our health and in our body?
All vaccines, basically, what they do is you have certain thing that's not good, and you give a tiny portion of that. But in other words, COVID is you have a virus, and COVID and it's a bad virus. So this just gives you the opportunity to now have these attack cells when it comes in, and attack molecules when it comes in, and to destroy it, which doesn't mean that you still couldn't get it, but if you did get it, it's like, how should I say this? If you have this army of bad guys coming, let's say there's 10 million bad guys coming into your body, now either you'll destroy all of them or you'll destroy most of them. If you destroy all of them, you'll never get the disease. If you destroy most of them, well, you won't get it nearly as bad as all these people that died from COVID. In terms of long-lasting effects, as far as I know, there aren't any. Every so often, there can be what's called a side effect, but really the data on it is that they're incredibly low, and in fact, lower than drugs, in fact, with the COVID vaccine, the side effects are lower than with flu vaccine, and it's much more effective. Just for reference, flu vaccines were effective like about 40 to 50% of the time. The COVID vaccines, over 90%. The mRNA COVID vaccines.
Thank you for your time today, Bob.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you for watching this new episode of the HumanWare Project. Please like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us.